In the afternoon, when the sun is blazing, and in early evening, when its orange hue allows me to stare into the horizon, I look out of this window in my office that opens into a terrace but offers a wider view. I see the palatial houses and imagine the few who live there in luxury. Then I think of the many who serve them, who hurl rolls of newspaper onto their porches, bring groceries, drive cars, sweep floors, toil in the sizzling kitchens. They dwell in shanty settlements ensconced within the affluent neighborhoods, or live in crammed quarters in the backyards of these houses. Before dusk, I can look beyond the trees and catch a clear glimpse of the thin-looking white minarets of the Faisal Mosque, one elegant and expansive structure on the slopes of the Margalla Hills. These minarets remind me of the worst dictator we have had. He lies buried in the gardens of this mosque while we still struggle to rein in the beasts of ignorance and bigotry he unleashed. Last week, when it stopped raining after several hours, I decided to go beyond the window and walk across the terrace to look over the street from above. I saw a young girl squatting by a small puddle and folding paper into boats. An odd mix of intense sorrow and great hope enveloped my heart. Aesthetically, this knit has to be an intricate work of a tailor and not the stitching of a cobbler. Whether the tone of expression is subtle or obvious, because sometimes it really depends on the context that any work of art has to be very obvious and blatant, direct, and mostly the aesthetics demand us for subtlety, for for softness and a kind of touching something and going away while making your point. That is largely how I treat my work and view my understanding of art and literature. And I have to confess that this understanding is my own experience, is rooted in my own experience of life, suffering, and creativity. This is a view from a Pakistani writer with a certain historic, existential, and ideological underpinnings, and therefore needless to say that the ideas are thoroughly debatable as these ideas that I'm presenting as any other ideas. So there's no claim to a universal understanding of art and literature. I always say that poetry is the only consistency in my tumultuous life. Undoubtedly, the value of any work of art, a poem or a painting, is determined by its aesthetic appeal. I mean, it has to look good. A painting has to look good. A poem has to sound good. A piece of fiction has to read well. I mean, you have to, it has to be aesthetically engaging. Sometimes its ugliness also has to be aesthetically engaging if something, something ugly is being presented. However, for myself, I find the creative process most gratifying when the chaos outside dissolves into the chaos within. So there has to be a connect.
There's lots of geopolitics in the literature which is coming out from this part of the world now. Is it possible to kind of bar yourself from that and still write?
I think your question has an answer in it. I mean, of course it is not. But I think that's true for any writer anywhere in this turbulent world, because the world is not easy. If you see yourself as a part of humanity, then something or the other will bother you. So there's a problem. I mean, we cannot compromise on aesthetics, which I said at the outset. But it has to be political. And any form of, when you communicate, when you speak, or when you write, or when you paint, or when you compose, it is political. So you may choose to be subtle, you may choose to be more direct, That's your choice, and that also gets dictated not just by your talent, but also by the context in which. I mean, you sometimes it is not easy for you to be subtle or indirect. So that is when you choose to be direct. But yes, I mean, it is political, and it has to be political. So even, you know, I have a friend who's a major writer and poet. I mean, most of you will be familiar with him, Sarmat Sehbai, and he and I always have this argument. I mean, he's very senior, of course, and a very competent writer and filmmaker and producer. There's something, I always question him, that it is about speaking to yourself, but what do you tell yourself when you are speaking to yourself? So it is basically, it is, you know, as I said, that I find it more interesting when what is happening inside gets connected to what is happening outside.
The poetry, the romantic poetry in Urdu, in Persian, and all the others, is perhaps one of the most romantic ever. And one thing which stands out is that the beloved is usually always a male. Why is that? In Urdu and Persian. Why is it all, whereas that's not the case in other, at least in English, that's not always the case.
You know, in Farsi, I'm not because our tradition, the Urdu and you know, in other South Asian, not South Asian actually, languages of the Indus plain, which are more influenced by Farsi, the tradition comes of calling your beloved Mehboob ka muzakkar hona, being, you know, a beloved is always a male, even if you are a male poet or a woman poet, comes from Farsi, essentially comes from Farsi, because here. If you go back to the dastans in this region, sir, you would find that the beloved is always a man, but the ashik or the seeker is a woman, whether it is Heer or Soni or Sassi. So you see, so that was a separate, different tradition from the Persian ghazal tradition, where ghair bhi mard hai aur mehboob bhi mard hai. Aapa taan tambure wale table baaje tol, na bandook si, na koi khanjar, na koi teer kama. Na kuffar di fauj nu sadya, na mujahid jamme. Aapa taan tambure wale table baaje tol, ना बंदूक सी, ना कोई खंजर, ना कोई तीर कमा, ना कुफार दी फौज नू सद्या, ना मुजाहिद जम्मे. साडे सारे टब्बर विच सी केड़ा शी जवां. पुत्तर कंजर, प्यू भी कंजर, कंजरी साडी मां. पुत्तर कंजर, प्यू भी कंजर, कंजरी साडी मां. असीं किसे नू दुख नहीं दिता, लित्ती नहीं कोई जां. I speak in a high-pitched voice, so the quiet in me is kept unheard. The quiet is due to a clog. The clog is caused by a clutter, the clutter of life. The clutter of life is the clutter of pain, spread all over, skulking inside, plugging crevices and holes in my being, cramming all spaces, seen and unseen. Filled so much, I become a void. The seasons of passion, anger, and lull bring no flower, no seed, no fruit to the barrenness of my soul. I scrape the dregs of time. Eyes outlined in ancient kohl, upper lip sharpened by a dark mole. I desired none, only wished to hold her hand and cry. I, a scar on the face of the earth, she, a star in the vastness of the sky.